On a frigid winter evening in the heart of New York City, when the neon lights flickered against the backdrop of a bustling urban landscape and the sounds of hurried footsteps blended with distant car horns and street vendors' calls, an unexpected moment of quiet beauty emerged. In the midst of the chaos, an elegant figure, Melania Trump, found herself pausing at a small, unassuming street corner. Known for her grace, refinement, and the poise that had accompanied her through years in the public eye, she now experienced an unforeseen stillness that pulled her away from the relentless pace of the metropolis. There, in the cold embrace of the night, beneath the soft glow of street lamps that barely warmed the pavement, sat a homeless man. Draped in a worn-out blanket that told silent stories of hardship and loss, he cradled an old, battered guitar as though it were a long-lost companion. His fingers, thin and marked by years of struggle, moved slowly and deliberately over the strings, coaxing out a melody that was raw and aching, a song imbued with sorrow yet flickering with the stubborn embers of hope. The music, neither grand nor orchestrated, was a gentle but insistent reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Melania, who had traversed countless elegant halls and attended grand events where music was celebrated in symphonies and orchestrated perfection, suddenly felt drawn to this singular sound that broke through the urban cacophony. The melody was not planned, nor was it rehearsed. It emerged from the depths of a life that had seen both light and darkness. In that moment, the former First Lady found herself captivated, her usually composed demeanor giving way to a profound empathy. She realized that the song was more than a mere arrangement of notes. It was a story of loss, of dreams deferred, and of an indomitable will to survive. The man, whose life had been reduced to this humble existence on the chilly streets, exuded an air of quiet dignity despite the ravages of circumstance. His eyes, dark and reflective, carried the weight of unspoken memories, a past filled with aspirations and moments of triumph that had long since faded into the background of hardship. As he played, every note resonated with the pain of having once known the vibrancy of a world where music was a language of dreams, and every chord hinted at the fragments of a life that had been lost along the way. Melania's steps slowed, her elegant heels clicking softly against the pavement, each stride measured as if she were walking through a reverie. In that unguarded pause, she sensed something more profound than transient pity. There was an undeniable call, a beckoning from a soul that had been overlooked by a society too busy to notice the beauty in its most broken parts. It was as if the music had reached deep into her core, stirring emotions that were rarely acknowledged in her meticulously ordered life. The scene before her was both heart-wrenching and inspiring. It was the raw tableau of human vulnerability, juxtaposed against the unyielding pulse of a city that rarely stopped to listen. The surrounding world continued in its hurried rhythm. Passers-by moved along without noticing, their eyes fixed on their own concerns, as if the homeless musician were just another part of the urban scenery, a background figure destined to fade into the blur of daily commotion. Coins were tossed into an open guitar case, barely enough to register a thought, and then the donors melted back into the anonymity of the crowd. Yet Melania remained, rooted to the spot by a force she could neither fully comprehend nor resist. It was not mere compassion that held her there. It was a deep, almost magnetic recognition of the artistry and pain interwoven in each strum of his guitar. In that silent, charged moment, the intersection of two vastly different worlds began to unfold. Melania, a symbol of elegance and power, and the homeless guitarist, a man whose only possession of true value was his music, were brought together by fate. Their meeting, seemingly insignificant in the vast, indifferent tapestry of New York City, held within it the promise of transformation. The stage was set for an unfolding story that would ripple far beyond that quiet street corner, a story about the extraordinary power of compassion, the redemptive qualities of art, and the unexpected ways in which lives can change in an instant. As the last note of his melancholic melody faded into the winter air, a profound stillness settled over the scene, a silence that spoke louder than any clamor of the city. This was the beginning of an encounter that would not only alter the course of one man's life, but also reaffirm a timeless truth. Even in the coldest, darkest moments, the spark of hope and the beauty of genuine human connection can light the way toward a brighter future. As the final note of the melancholy melody faded into the frosty evening air, an almost tangible silence enveloped the small street corner. The rhythmic pulse of New York's endless hustle seemed to momentarily recede, leaving behind an intimate bubble of stillness in which two very different lives converged. Melania stood transfixed, her eyes not merely observing but absorbing every detail of the scene before her. There was an ineffable quality in the way the homeless guitarist sat on his worn-out blanket, his posture both fragile and resolute, a living testament to a past filled with unfulfilled dreams and moments of artistic brilliance. In that quiet interlude, as the city's incessant clamor dulled to a distant murmur, an unspoken exchange passed between them. Melania's heart, usually encased in the measured rhythms of protocol and reserve, began to beat in a cadence that resonated with the raw vulnerability emanating from the man and his guitar. She did not need to speak. Her presence was an invitation, a silent assurance that he was being truly seen, not merely observed as a transient figure in a bustling urban tableau. The homeless musician's eyes, dark and reflective like storm clouds, heavy with unwept tears, flickered with a mix of surprise and cautious hope. It was as if, for the first time in many long, lonely nights, someone had taken the time to pause, to look deeply, and to recognize the artistry woven into the strains of his song. His life, once filled with the vibrant promise of music, had been reduced to days of playing for fleeting coins and the indifferent glances of passers-by. Yet, in that moment of mutual recognition, the faint embers of his forgotten dreams began to glow anew. The surrounding urban landscape, with its neon glare and endless streams of hurried footsteps, provided a stark contrast to the intimate scene unfolding at that street corner. Here, away from the polished facades of luxury and success, every element, the biting cold, the soft rustling of brittle leaves, the gentle luminescence of a solitary street lamp, conspired to magnify the poignancy of the encounter. Melania's own life, meticulously crafted and often under the relentless scrutiny of the public eye, suddenly felt less defined by the gilded trappings of status and more by the simple, enduring pulse of human connection. Without a single word exchanged, the two shared a profound moment of introspection. For Melania, it was a chance to reconnect with the raw, unfiltered reality that lay beyond the confines of official events and orchestrated appearances. For the homeless guitarist, whose name, David Carter, echoed silently in the recesses of his memory, it was an opportunity to be seen for who he truly was: an artist, a dreamer, and a soul who had once dared to hope. The air itself seemed to vibrate with possibility. Melania's compassionate gaze lingered on David's calloused hands, which had strummed out melodies that spoke of loss, resilience, and a life once rich with promise. Each line on his weathered face, each gentle tremor in his fingers was a story, a chronicle of long nights under the indifferent stars and the bittersweet echoes of what might have been. In that moment, the boundaries of class, fame, and fortune blurred, replaced by the universal language of music and the shared language of human suffering and hope. As she stood there, Melania allowed herself to be enveloped by the gravity of the encounter. Memories of her own challenges, of moments when she had felt isolated beneath the weight of expectation, surfaced quietly. In those memories lay a deep understanding that sometimes the most transformative encounters occur when we dare to step away from our carefully curated lives and immerse ourselves in the reality of another's pain and passion. The city around her, with all its glitter and grandeur, receded into insignificance when compared to the raw, unadorned truth of the moment. Time seemed to elongate, each second stretching out like the lingering echo of a cherished refrain. Melania's inner world, usually so meticulously controlled, opened up to the unfiltered beauty of genuine empathy. She recognized that David's music was more than just sound. It was a lifeline, a plea, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even when battered by the storms of fate. The sorrow in his melody was interwoven with threads of hope, each note a whisper of a future that might still hold the promise of renewal if only someone cared to listen. In that suspended space, the street transformed into a microcosm of possibility. The cold, indifferent pavement became a stage for an unfolding narrative of redemption and rebirth. The muted colors of the urban backdrop, grays, blues, and the occasional burst of neon, merged with the tender warmth of an unexpected connection. Here, amidst the anonymity of the city, two lives converged in an act of silent communion, where the only language needed was the language of the heart. The encounter was not merely a fleeting moment of pity or a transient spark of curiosity. It was the genesis of something far deeper, a seed of transformation that, once planted, would have the power to reshape not only the course of David's life, but also the lives of those who, like Melania, had long forgotten the profound impact of a single act of genuine kindness. In that stillness, where every sound and every heartbeat seemed amplified, the promise of a miracle took root. As the chilly wind whispered through the narrow street and the glow of the street lamp softened the harsh lines of the night, Melania made a silent vow. This was not to be an isolated moment of empathy to be swept away by the relentless tide of the city. Instead, it was a call to action, a realization that the stories of those who had been marginalized, forgotten, or cast aside deserved to be heard, celebrated, and, if possible, given a chance to rise again. The recognition of David's talent, buried beneath layers of hardship and neglect, became a catalyst for a journey that would extend far beyond the confines of that cold winter evening. In that unspoken communion, the promise of change shimmered faintly in the night air, a promise that would soon set the stage for events neither of them could have foreseen. The unyielding rhythms of the city, which moments before had symbolized the relentless march of progress and indifference, now seemed to echo with the potential for a profound transformation. And as Melania turned away from the corner with a heart now stirred by the raw power of human resilience, she carried with her the unshakable belief that sometimes the simplest acts of listening and acknowledging another's truth can ignite a spark capable of dispelling the darkness. Thus, in that quiet interlude on a New York City street, where the worlds of opulence and despair met in a fleeting dance of fate, an unspoken pact was forged, a pact between a woman of high stature and a man whose life had been defined by the struggle to be heard. It was a moment that would ripple outward, altering destinies and rekindling the long-forgotten flame of hope in hearts that had grown numb to the passage of time. In the hours that followed the silent communion on that icy street corner, the delicate interplay of fate and compassion began to take on a new, tangible form. As the evening deepened into night, Melania left the small enclave of forgotten dreams with a renewed sense of purpose. Her footsteps, once hesitant and soft against the worn pavement, now carried the weight and determination of someone who had witnessed a hidden truth, a truth that transcended appearances and titles. The encounter with the homeless guitarist, whose life had been etched in notes of sorrow and hope, stirred something profound within her. She resolved that this moment of connection was not meant to fade into the anonymity of a fleeting winter night. Rather, it was the spark of a transformation that could rekindle lost dreams and rewrite the future for those who had been consigned to the margins of society. Later that night, in the quiet solitude of her car parked away from the glaring lights and ceaseless noise of the city, Melania's mind replayed every detail of the encounter with vivid clarity. The image of the worn blanket, the delicate caress of the musician's fingers on his battered guitar, and the haunting melody that had broken through the urban din coalesced into a powerful memory that refused to be ignored. It was in that reflective moment that she made a decision, a commitment to become an active agent of change rather than a passive witness to the endless cycle of neglect. The next morning brought with it the cool promise of renewal. With a resolve as steady as the rising sun over the city's skyline, Melania retraced her steps to the very street corner where fate had first intertwined her life with that of David Carter, the homeless guitarist. There he was again, a solitary figure in the familiar setting, a man whose eyes carried the scars of countless rejections, yet still held a fragile ember of resilience. His presence, now illuminated by the gentle light of day, seemed less burdened by the weight of the past and more open to the possibility of a future that might still hold redemption. Moved by an inner urgency and guided by an unyielding belief in the transformative power of genuine connection, Melania embarked on a series of actions that would irrevocably alter the course of David's life. Without hesitation, she reached for her phone, a simple act that belied the magnitude of the promise it contained. In that quiet moment of determination, she contacted an old friend, a man whose expertise in the music industry was renowned for unearthing hidden talent and nurturing dreams that had long been buried beneath the rubble of despair. Mark Stevenson, the owner of a modest yet remarkably well-equipped recording studio nestled in one of New York City's artsy enclaves, became the conduit for the promise of a new beginning. For Melania, the call was not merely a professional transaction, it was an act of faith. The decision to arrange a recording session for a man who had lived in the shadows of society was fueled by her conviction that true talent and passion deserved to be recognized regardless of one's circumstances. As she spoke with Mark, every word she uttered was imbued with the quiet determination of someone who had seen the raw, unrefined beauty of a life lived on the edge of hope and despair. There was no hesitancy in her tone, no concession to the cynicism that often accompanies such initiatives. Instead, there was an unwavering certainty that David Carter's music could transcend the cold boundaries of the streets and touch the hearts of many. When Melania later returned to the street the following morning, the city seemed to pause in anticipation of the next chapter. There, amid the familiar backdrop of faded graffiti and the persistent hum of everyday life, David sat with his guitar as though time had not altered his place in the world. Yet there was an imperceptible difference in his demeanor, a subtle shift that hinted at the inner turmoil of a man caught between the desolation of his past and the stirring hope of a future yet to be written. His eyes, often guarded and reflective, betrayed a flicker of apprehension as he noted her return. It was as if he recognized in her poised gaze and measured steps an invitation to step beyond the confines of his long-standing resignation. Melania's presence on that cold, indifferent street was a stark reminder that sometimes fate presents an opportunity to reclaim one's identity from the clutches of hopelessness. In the ensuing moments, the atmosphere grew charged with a quiet intensity. The city's relentless pace softened, and the world around them seemed to hold its breath. Every detail, the whisper of the wind through discarded leaves, the soft murmur of distant traffic, and the steady rhythm of David's unpracticed strumming, became part of a larger symphony of possibility. A transformation was quietly underway. David, who had once resigned himself to the invisibility of life on the streets, now found himself confronted with the promise of a stage far removed from the indifferent glances of passers-by. With a mixture of trepidation and a nascent hope that had long been dormant, he listened as Melania conveyed, through the gravity of her presence and the quiet assurance in her eyes, the plan for a recording session that would offer him a taste of a world he had only dared to imagine in his most private moments. The idea of stepping into a professional recording studio, a space filled with polished instruments, sophisticated equipment, and the promise of an audience that truly listened, was both exhilarating and terrifying to him. It was a stark departure from the makeshift stage of a street corner, where every note was met with the casual indifference of a hurried passerby. Within the controlled environment of the recording studio, every sound was meticulously captured and cherished. The walls, lined with soundproof panels and adorned with the artifacts of countless musical endeavors, stood as silent witnesses to the power of creative expression. For David, the studio was a revelation, a stark contrast to the rough, unyielding textures of the streets that had been his sole stage for so long. It was here that he would be challenged to confront the ghosts of his past and to rediscover the passion that had once fueled his dreams. Every piece of equipment, from the gleaming microphones to the intricate mixing consoles, symbolized a world of possibilities, a realm where talent was given the opportunity to flourish and where every note carried the promise of transformation. The first steps into this unfamiliar territory were fraught with hesitation and self-doubt. David's heart pounded as he entered the studio, the polished floors and precise lighting casting an almost surreal glow on a man who had known only the rough edges of life. In that space, the memories of countless nights spent playing for fleeting coins mingled with the anticipation of a future that was suddenly within reach. The fear of failure, of having his fragile hopes shattered once more, loomed large. Yet there was also an undeniable courage, an ember of determination that had survived the harshest winters of his life. It was a courage born of necessity, of a deep-seated belief that within him lay the ability to rise above the circumstances that had defined him for so long. As David's trembling hands cradled his battered guitar, a companion that had accompanied him through the darkest nights and the bleakest days, he began to understand that this recording session was more than just a technical exercise. It was a rite of passage, a moment of reckoning where the weight of past disappointments and the promise of future redemption converged. The studio, with its myriad of buttons, dials, and soft hums of active machinery, became the setting for an intimate confrontation between the man he had been and the man he might yet become. In the stillness of that morning, as Melania's unwavering support echoed in the silent corners of the studio, David Carter faced the most challenging question of his life. Could he dare to believe in himself once again? The possibility of rekindling a passion that had been all but extinguished was both a temptation and a terror. It was a leap of faith into an unknown realm where every note played carried the risk of exposing his vulnerabilities. Yet, as he sat there in the soft glow of the studio lights, surrounded by the promise of a fresh start, he realized that the only way to escape the perpetual cycle of despair was to take that first tentative step toward reclaiming his identity as an artist. In that transformative moment, the studio door closed on the past and swung open to a future that shimmered with the possibility of renewal. Melania's silent intervention, a gesture born of empathy and an unyielding belief in the transformative power of art, had ignited within David a spark that he had long thought extinguished. The decision to accept the recording session was not just an acceptance of an opportunity, it was an affirmation of his inherent worth, a rejection of the notion that his life had been defined solely by hardship and invisibility. Thus, as the morning unfolded and the city outside continued its ceaseless rhythm, David Carter embarked on a journey that would test the limits of his resolve and challenge him to redefine what it meant to be truly alive. In the delicate interplay of light and sound, amid the hum of sophisticated machinery and the quiet support of a compassionate stranger, a man on the fringes of society took his first bold step toward reclaiming his voice, a voice that, for so long, had been drowned out by the relentless noise of indifference. The promise of new beginnings, whispered softly in the cool New York air, beckoned him forward into a realm where hope and resilience could forge a future that was his alone to create. Inside the recording studio, the atmosphere was charged with an almost sacred energy, a stark contrast to the frigid, indifferent streets that had long been David's stage. Here, amid meticulously arranged equipment and soft, ambient lighting, every detail seemed to whisper promises of rebirth and possibility. The walls, draped in soundproof panels and adorned with memorabilia from past musical triumphs, bore silent witness to the transformative journey that was about to unfold. David, still clutching his battered guitar, hesitated at the threshold of this unfamiliar world. His heart pounded as the weight of years spent in obscurity and despair pressed down on him, but so too did a nascent hope that began to flicker within. It was a hope born of the realization that this space was not defined by past failures but by the endless possibilities of the future, a realm where every note could become a stepping stone toward redemption. The studio, with its polished surfaces and the quiet hum of advanced machinery, offered David a chance to confront his deepest fears. Every piece of equipment, from the gleaming microphone suspended in perfect symmetry to the massive mixing console brimming with endless buttons and dials, spoke of a world where precision and passion merged to create art that touched souls. In this controlled sanctuary of sound, David felt both exposed and empowered. The familiar ache of doubt, honed by years of rejection, stirred inside him, yet it was now met with the gentle encouragement of a compassionate presence who had seen the raw beauty of his talent. Guided by an almost imperceptible current of determination, David set up his instrument with trembling yet deliberate hands. The studio's silence was palpable, broken only by the occasional whisper of air through the ventilation and the soft rustle of paper as technical notes were made. In that quiet space, the boundaries between the past and the present began to blur. Memories of countless nights spent under the cold New York sky, playing for indifferent onlookers, merged with a profound desire to reclaim the identity of the artist he once believed in. Each strum of his guitar carried with it the echoes of both loss and hope, a bittersweet reminder that while the world might have forgotten him, his inner spirit remained unbroken. As he sat before the microphone, a transformative stillness enveloped him. The intimidating glare of the studio lights softened into a gentle glow that seemed to cradle him in its warmth, encouraging him to let go of his long-held reservations. The professional environment, once alien and intimidating, slowly morphed into a canvas on which he could finally express the raw emotion that had been bottled up for years. It was here, in this moment of vulnerability and strength, that David began to understand the true power of his music, not just as a means of survival, but as a declaration of his existence, his identity, and his indomitable will to rise again. Every note he played resonated with the gravity of his experiences. The first tentative chords, initially hesitant and laden with uncertainty, gradually gave way to a richer, more confident sound as he began to trust his instincts. The melodies that flowed from his fingertips were unpolished and real, filled with the deep-seated emotions of a man who had weathered countless storms. With each successive take, he found a rhythm that was uniquely his own, a blend of sorrow, defiance, and a resilient hope that refused to be silenced by the harshness of his past. In that transformative session, the studio transcended its role as a mere physical space. It became a crucible for renewal. The sophisticated equipment, once a symbol of an unattainable world of glamour and success, now served as a bridge connecting David to the core of his artistic soul. The recording session was more than a technical exercise. It was a profound act of self-discovery and catharsis. Every sound captured, every reverberating note, was a testament to the idea that true art is born not from perfection, but from the willingness to embrace one's scars and transform them into a source of beauty. As the session progressed, David's guarded demeanor slowly melted away, replaced by an authentic expression of his inner self. The studio, with its carefully calibrated acoustics and the quiet support of those around him, provided a space where his doubts were gradually replaced by a burgeoning confidence. The realization that his voice, long suppressed and drowned out by the clamor of the streets, could now find an audience was nothing short of miraculous. It was a revelation that stirred within him a determination to no longer be defined by the shadows of his past. In that moment of creative surrender, the essence of David's music emerged in all its raw, unfiltered glory. The strains of his guitar, imbued with memories of loss and the fierce longing for renewal, coalesced into a powerful narrative, a narrative that was uniquely his own. It was a testament to the enduring power of resilience and the belief that even the most battered souls could rise again to create something beautiful. As the final chords echoed softly through the studio, a profound silence followed, a silence filled not with the absence of sound, but with the quiet, resounding affirmation that David had at long last rediscovered his voice. The recording session had become a turning point, marking the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A chapter defined by the courage to believe in himself once more and the promise of a future where his music would no longer be relegated to the forgotten corners of the city. In that transformative space, amidst the soft glow of the studio lights and the hum of machinery that now seemed to celebrate his rebirth, David Carter realized that his journey was far from over. The echoes of his music, rich with the pain of his past and the hope of his future, would serve as a beacon for all those who had ever felt invisible in the vast, indifferent tapestry of the world. With renewed resolve and the silent, unwavering support of a compassionate stranger who had seen the beauty in his soul, David stepped out of the studio, a man reborn, carrying within him the promise that the power of art and the courage to dream could light even the darkest of paths. Armed with the rediscovered strength of his own voice and the tangible proof of his talent etched into every recorded note, David Carter embarked on the next phase of his journey, a decisive step toward the stage that would redefine his identity. In the days that followed the transformative studio session, the once invisible street musician began preparing for an opportunity that held the promise of forever altering the course of his life. His mind, once clouded by doubt and the weight of past rejections, now brimmed with a cautious optimism fueled by the memory of that session, a moment when every fiber of his being had resonated with the pure expression of his art. The invitation to perform at an upcoming showcase for undiscovered artists had stirred a mixture of trepidation and excitement in David. This event, modest in scale yet monumental in meaning, would provide him with the rare chance to present his music on a professional stage. In the weeks leading up to the showcase, he spent countless hours rehearsing in solitude, retracing the melody that had awakened his soul in the studio. Each practice session was imbued with the bittersweet recollection of past struggles, a reminder of long nights on cold sidewalks and the endless chorus of voices that had once passed him by without a second glance. Yet with every note he practiced, a new sense of possibility grew, steadily overcoming the entrenched fears that had once defined him. The night of the showcase arrived like a culmination of every hope David had dared to nurture. The intimate theater, nestled in New York City's vibrant arts district, glowed softly under the ambient lights. Inside, the space was transformed into a haven for authentic artistic expression, a sanctuary where each seat was filled by an audience not seeking spectacle, but yearning for genuine emotion and truth. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, a collective breath held in quiet expectation, as those gathered prepared to witness raw talent laid bare before them. Backstage, David felt the full force of his vulnerability and determination. His heart pounded in tandem with the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the worn leather of his guitar strap, a reminder of the countless hours he had spent honing his craft under far less forgiving conditions. As he paced slowly, every step toward the stage felt monumental, as if he were treading a path that diverged sharply from his past life on the streets. Melania's silent encouragement earlier had become a beacon in his memory, a warm glow that he clung to even as uncertainty threatened to overwhelm him. Her presence had instilled in him a belief that, despite the scars of years spent in obscurity, there was a place for his music in the world, a place where his story would no longer be confined to the margins. When the moment finally arrived, David stepped onto the stage amidst a hushed silence that spoke louder than any fanfare. The spotlight bathed him in a gentle radiance, momentarily blinding him to the sea of expectant faces before he gradually adjusted, his eyes scanning the room until they settled on a small cluster in the front row where Melania stood, her expression one of unwavering encouragement. In that instant, every fear that had once threatened to paralyze him dissolved into the background, replaced by a deep, resonant determination to share his truth. As he began to play, the first tentative chords emerged, a soft prelude to the torrent of emotion that was to follow. David's fingers, though still trembling slightly, soon found their natural rhythm. His voice, raw and unpolished, wove through the melody like a confession of years spent in silence. Each note he played carried the weight of his struggles, the sting of lost opportunities and the brilliant, defiant hope that he had dared to nurture. The performance was not merely a musical rendition. It was a powerful narrative of survival, a testament to the transformative power of art in healing even the most broken of spirits. The theater, initially steeped in quiet anticipation, gradually became electrified with the intensity of his performance. Every strum of the guitar, every carefully articulated chord, drew the audience deeper into his world, a world where pain and resilience danced in delicate balance. The silence of the room, punctuated only by the sincere cadence of his song, transformed into a collective experience of shared emotion. Listeners, for a fleeting moment, were united by the raw honesty that emanated from the stage, a truth that defied the superficiality of everyday existence. As the final notes of his song lingered in the air, an almost palpable stillness descended, a silence so profound it felt as though time itself had paused to honor the moment. Then, slowly, a single hand rose in applause, followed by another until the silence was replaced by a wave of enthusiastic, heartfelt clapping. The sound of the audience's response was not one of obligatory courtesy, but of genuine appreciation, a chorus of recognition that affirmed the beauty and truth of David's journey. In that surge of applause, David felt a profound shift. No longer was he a nameless figure relegated to the cold corners of the city. He had, for the first time, been seen, heard, and validated by a community of strangers united by the shared power of his music. Standing on that stage amidst the thunderous ovation, David's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a silent acknowledgement of the years he had endured, the battles he had fought, and the overwhelming surge of hope that now coursed through him. The performance marked more than just a career milestone. It was a personal rebirth, a declaration that the darkness of his past could be transcended by the light of his own enduring spirit. With every cheer, every clapping hand, he rediscovered a sense of belonging, a feeling that his voice, his art, had finally found its rightful place in the world. As the lights dimmed and the applause slowly subsided, the stage became a sanctuary of reflection. Backstage, amidst quiet congratulations and gentle pats on the back, David felt a profound shift in his inner landscape. The stage had not only affirmed his talent, but had also reawakened a belief in himself that had lain dormant for far too long. In that transformative moment, the promise of a new beginning was no longer a distant dream, but a tangible reality that he could step into with both courage and conviction. Leaving the stage, David's journey had taken a turn from mere survival to the pursuit of a dream rekindled. With each step he took out of the theater and back into the vibrant pulse of New York City, he carried with him the echoes of that life-changing performance, a reminder that the smallest act of believing in oneself could set in motion a cascade of possibilities. The applause still rang in his ears as he embraced the new path unfolding before him. A path where his music would no longer be relegated to the shadows, but would shine as a beacon of hope for all those who had ever felt unseen. In the days and weeks following that fateful performance, David Carter's life began to pulse with the vibrant promise of possibility. The echoes of that transformative stage where his music had awakened the hearts of an entire theater continued to resonate deeply within him, as if each note he had played were a seed of change sown into the fabric of his soul. Now, with every new sunrise over the sprawling cityscape of New York, he found himself stepping further away from the cold anonymity of the streets and inching closer toward a future where his art could truly flourish. The once dim corners of his life were now illuminated by the glow of recognition and hope. David's journey, which had started in the bitter chill of urban neglect, had transformed into a sweeping odyssey of self-discovery and renewal. Every day he carried with him the memory of that showcase, the palpable energy of the audience's applause, the silent tears of triumph streaming down his face, and the overwhelming sense of belonging that had filled him in those precious moments. These recollections became his guiding light, a reminder that even the most battered soul could reclaim its voice and its dignity. Across the city, the impact of David's performance began to ripple outward in ways he had never imagined. Word of the homeless musician who had stepped onto a real stage spread like wildfire through both the underground arts community and the more established corridors of cultural influence. Local newspapers ran features that spoke not only of his talent, but also of his resilience and the transformative power of an unexpected act of kindness. Social media buzzed with heartfelt tributes and viral videos capturing the raw emotion of his performance. And soon, the story of David Carter evolved into a beacon of inspiration, a testament to the idea that a single act of compassion can ignite a spark in the most unlikely of hearts. For Melania, watching David's journey unfold was a deeply personal experience. No longer confined to the gilded halls of political life and high society, she found solace in the authenticity of human connection. Her decision to intervene had not been an impulsive act of charity, but rather a deliberate choice to look beyond the superficial divisions that so often segregate our world. Through her eyes, the story of David was a microcosm of a greater truth, that every person, regardless of their background, carries within them the potential for greatness, waiting only for someone to believe in them. As she witnessed David's evolution from a man shrouded in despair to one who now embraced the stage with newfound confidence, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a reaffirmation that genuine empathy and a willingness to see the beauty in others could spark monumental change. In the weeks that followed, David's life began to organize itself around a renewed purpose. Invitations arrived from community centers, small clubs, and local arts festivals, each one a stepping stone toward a broader platform for his music. Yet, even as new opportunities beckoned, he remained profoundly aware of the journey that had brought him to this moment. Every strum of his guitar served as a reminder of the long nights spent on cold sidewalks. Every chord echoed the whispers of lost dreams, and every note carried the weight of a past that he was determined to transcend. With each performance, he not only shared his music, but also offered a piece of his story, a narrative of struggle, resilience, and the transformative power of hope. David's newfound success was not without its challenges. The world of professional music, even at its grassroots level, came with its own set of pressures and uncertainties. There were moments when self-doubt crept back into the corners of his mind, threatening to dim the light he had so painstakingly ignited. Yet, in those moments of vulnerability, he would recall the faces in the theater, the thunderous applause that had affirmed his worth, and the quiet, unwavering support of Melania, the woman who had seen him when no one else would. This inner reservoir of strength and gratitude became the bedrock upon which he built his renewed identity. As time went on, David became more than just a musician. He evolved into a symbol of transformation for countless others who felt lost in the shadows of society. Community centers began to invite him to speak about his journey, and he found himself mentoring young artists who, like him, had once believed that their voices were destined to be silenced. In workshops held in modest rehearsal spaces and local community halls, he shared not only the technicalities of his craft, but also the emotional cadence of his life, teaching others that every setback was a prelude to a greater comeback, and that hope, no matter how fragile, was a force capable of overcoming even the darkest of circumstances. Meanwhile, the impact of Melania's intervention extended far beyond her immediate act of compassion. Inspired by the undeniable change she had helped catalyze, she began to advocate for broader initiatives aimed at empowering marginalized communities through the arts. Collaborating with local charities and cultural organizations, she worked tirelessly to create platforms for undiscovered talent, a movement that sought to bridge the gap between the opulence of the privileged and the hidden reservoirs of talent in the most overlooked corners of the city. Through public appearances, thoughtful interviews, and quiet, behind-the-scenes efforts, she championed the idea that true progress is achieved not through grand gestures alone, but through a series of small, consistent acts of kindness and belief. The transformation of David's life thus became a catalyst for a wider ripple effect, a narrative that intertwined individual redemption with the collective reawakening of a community's conscience. His music, once relegated to the anonymity of a street corner, now resonated in a variety of spaces, from intimate cafes to bustling community festivals. Each performance served as a reminder that art has the power to heal, to unite, and to transform lives. And with every note played, David helped to dismantle the invisible barriers that had once confined him, replacing them with bridges built on empathy, understanding, and shared humanity. On quiet evenings, as David walked the familiar streets of New York, he no longer felt the weight of invisibility pressing upon him. Instead, he sensed the subtle yet profound changes in the world around him, a community slowly awakening to the truth that every soul, no matter how weathered by life's adversities, has a story worth telling. He often paused at the very corner where his journey had begun, where the memory of a cold winter night and the soft strains of his guitar had sparked the beginning of his transformation. There he would sit quietly, his heart full of gratitude and his spirit buoyed by the knowledge that he had not only reclaimed his own life, but had also illuminated a path for others to follow. The journey ahead was filled with both promise and uncertainty, a tapestry woven from the threads of countless challenges and the radiant hope of new beginnings. Yet, as David continued to embrace his identity as an artist and as a beacon for the voiceless, he understood that the true measure of success was not in the fleeting applause of a single performance, but in the enduring impact of one's willingness to rise above adversity. His story, interlaced with the compassion of a stranger and the transformative power of music, stood as a testament to the profound truth that within every human heart lies the potential for greatness, a greatness that can flourish when nurtured by understanding, belief, and the simple act of listening. And so, as the city of New York moved relentlessly forward, its towering structures and bustling streets now carrying whispers of change, David Carter's journey continued. It was a journey marked by every struggle overcome, every note played from the depths of his soul, and every life touched by the ripple of his transformation. The legacy of that winter night, a night when two disparate lives converged and a forgotten melody found its voice, was not confined to the pages of a transient story. It had become a living, breathing reminder that even in the most unlikely of places, hope can be found, and miracles can blossom from the simplest act of genuine care. In the end, the true magic of David's journey was not measured by the accolades or the fleeting spotlight, but by the enduring promise that every person, no matter how overlooked or weathered by life's storms, possesses the power to rise, to inspire, and to illuminate the world around them. And as long as there are hearts willing to listen and hands ready to lift one another, the melody of hope will continue to play, A timeless symphony echoing across the ages, inviting us all to believe in the beauty of new beginnings. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing stories. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, that way you'll never miss our newest uploads.